Hey guys, it's Jacob from StringBuzz here, stringbuzzworld.org being the music journalism site, links are in the description down below. And we have a brand new type of segment to bring to you today, and that's underrated or overrated. This time around we have pop music stars, so I'm going to refer to the original article as I usually do for these videos, so I hope you enjoy. So this is a popular sort of segment that I'm seeing posted by many sites and many channels at the moment, since it seems to be getting a great sort of feedback. It seems to be creating great conversations, and it can generate some pretty funny controversies as well, and I think it applies to music really well as well. So I'll be doing many of these based off of the response of this first video, this first segment, and it will incorporate many other genres, maybe other singers, maybe other artists, etc. and etc. I hope you enjoy, and don't forget that these are just personal opinions of mine, and if you disagree with me, then that's more than just fine, and I'd love to hear why, and maybe you can get this cold heart beating warm again. So first up we have Little Mix, and they're overrated. If you have seen any of my reviews at this point, you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of this group, despite Leanne herself, and I keep raising this because it's a fun little bit of trivia about myself. Yeah, she went to my school in the year above. She was good friends with one of my friend's sister. She dropped her when she became famous, unfortunately. I just found every single one of their releases to be so phoned in and so harmless that it just makes the group seem like a factory of blandness, churning out tofu flavored track after tofu flavored track. And I know tofu takes up the flavor of other meats and other foods, and why would you have tofu with other meats, but other foods, but yeah, you're getting what I'm meaning here. It just doesn't help that they are almost identical to Fifth Harmony, everything from their sort of talent show past to their inoffensive present. It's just so tame, so generic, it's snooze inducing, and they seem to avoid a lot of critical response, which is why they've landed in our overrated section. The next one up on this list has to be Justin Bieber, and I think he's underrated. Now, before you rip my arms off and hit me with those beautiful soggy bits, let me just describe to you why I think he is underrated. Now, I think Justin Bieber is more acclaimed for his personality, as a model, as a reality figure, just as a face really, rather than for his actual talent. Sure, I don't really like his music, and as far as I know, he hasn't actually released a song to date which I could call good, let alone great or anything like that, but at least this guy is an artist in the pop music industry. He can play drums reasonably well, he can sing without post-production effects fantastically well, he can play other instruments to a decent enough degree, and to me, yeah, he's actually just an artist of some form, which is more than can be said for 99% of other pop music icons around at the moment. The guy showcased from a very young age that he is musically very capable, and I think a lot of people have perhaps forgotten that by now and have let the fanboyisms ruin their sort of flavor of Justin that they want to really be tasting. And yeah, I probably shouldn't have used that sort of analogy, but just as a disclaimer, I still think the majority of his music is absolute crap. The next one up on this list has to be Bruno Mars, and I think he is underrated. Now, this guy is the biggest male pop star on earth, so how in any way can he be underrated? Well, judging by the reaction to a lot of his tracks by many other musicians, by many other names out there, I can see that this guy perhaps doesn't really get the props he deserves as a musical trendsetter. Now, the guy alongside Daft Punk made disco / funk music cool again around sort of 3 years ago or so. He then made 90s pop funk disco music really cool again as well, so he made two eras of disco music cool again. He then made ballads fairly cool again, since as soon as he started releasing some ballads when he really broke onto the scene, everyone just copied him to try and get into the charts like he did. And he is fantastic at melody writing as well. He's actually one of the best melody writers around at the moment. He's one I can consistently identify as writing the best melodies. He does suffer from being overplayed. I don't think I can just put that to one side, and I think he does put a lot of other people off because of that, and that's understandable, but he is self-made from a very difficult background and has worked incredibly hard to be where he is at today, and he keeps hitting that #1 spot with ease. So yeah, I think he's underrated as like a decade-defining icon. The next artist up on this list is Lady Gaga, and yes, I think she's slightly overrated. Now, this will be an incredibly unpopular decision, and yes, like Justin and Bruno, she is capable at playing instruments, and she also has a fairly decent voice as well. No, that's probably a bit mean of me. She has a great voice, but I think her capabilities overall and her releases are overrated from a songwriting standpoint, because she's seen as this tuitive force, this technical and illustrious songwriter who's better than everyone else, and she just thinks outside of the box when she just really doesn't from my point of view. When she first hit onto the scene, she was catchy, but in some sort of like very generic popcorn pop sort of way, and it was during a time where pop music was perhaps at its weakest of all time. Let's consider people like Sean Kingston were consistently hitting somewhere in the top 10 during that time. But I will concentrate on her album Joanne, since I think that's the one which really got me feeling that she was a bit overrated. It just felt like just because she tried something different and incorporated some organic instrumentation this time around, that people immediately gave her the highest of praise because she's a pop star using instruments. Wow. For me personally, it sounded like a very generic album full of country ballad sort of cliches. Some really shoddy personas were shoved in there as well, and it all felt just a touch pandering, I guess, really. I think as far as country music goes, it's taken a battering fairly recently, but I think she just did make some kind of poor country music, and I think she's a great person. I think she is very talented, but I don't think she is the songbird of our generation that she is being made out to be. She needs a little work, I think. The next artist up on this list is Ed Sheeran, and if you've watched any of the podcasts, which I have done alongside other people, you will already know my opinion of him, and I do think he's overrated at this point. Ed Sheeran was incredibly refreshing when he originally broke out onto the scene, can't deny that. The way he combined folk music with rap, incorporating very realistic themes, just hit every single note with me. But I'd say it's been at least 5 years since he's released a good song, in my opinion, that he hasn't just ripped off from somebody else, hasn't stolen from somebody else. He seems to have incorporated a lot of soul music, dancehall music, and general pop music into his sound right now, the sort of trending sounds, and it all sounds a bit of a mess to me because he hasn't really got a soulful voice, in my opinion. It is more of a folky voice. His new album lyrically was very average, if not just bad. Performance-wise was kind of all over the place because he was trying to sound more like a soul singer, and he just didn't really showcase any musicianship despite him being perhaps the most naturally talented person on this list. The guy is a fantastic guitarist, yet we don't really see it very often anymore. Again, he is self-made and worked very hard, so I've got no problem with that, but now it feels like he's just pandering, and his last album in particular could have been written and performed by anyone else and I probably wouldn't have cared. He is no longer an artist I really look forward to listening to, and he has lost everything that made him likable as a songwriter too. Again, a bloody nice chap, but yeah, I'm not feeling his music anymore. So what do I think of Katy Perry? Now, I think Katy Perry is underrated. Now, Katy Perry is catching a lot of flack at the moment for her going through a genuinely rough time, which I think is a bit harsh, really. She's genuinely become quite a controversial figure over the last year or so when it comes to music because of some silly things she said, some silly things she's done, some silly ways she's acted, and for some silly clothing and image ideas. But I personally think she is responsible for at least 5 year-defining tracks, and that takes some talent to be at the top of each year coming across. Let's not forget that Katy Perry is just a persona, and unlike Nicki Minaj or Lady Gaga, who try to constantly shove these personas down our necks, both in their music and as well as in the media in general, again in the way they act, Katy Perry is such a great persona that nobody even realizes that it is a put-on persona, that it's not her real name, and that it's more of just a stage name and like, I don't know the best way of putting it, but you get what I mean. She has a booming voice, has written some of the catchiest choruses of all time, and regardless of your musical standpoint, you have sang along to at least 5 Katy Perry choruses at this point in your life, and has been one of the biggest sort of female stars now for at least 10 years. And sure, her music isn't up my alley per se, but she sells, and she sells a whole ton. That's why she's one of the biggest selling artists of all time, and still at quite a young age. Also, she's one of the few artists, up until this year anyway, who has always had their music level pegging with their figureship. And what I mean by that is that people talk about her music just as much as they talk about her, which I think is a rare commodity in pop music anyways nowadays. The last person on this list is Taylor Swift, and I think she is massively overrated, and sorry for that weird dramatization of her name there. Now, I'm not going to rattle on about Taylor's last few outings, since you all probably know now that it's not my cup of tea, and that's perfectly fine, but I kind of want to target where she really first broke out from in her first few records. For some reason, these records seem to be regarded as the most influential, if not the best, of all time when it comes to country music albums, and I think they're just average. average, if not pants, in my opinion. And yes, that is my personal opinion. If you disagree, that is totally fine. A lot of her fans keep sort of asking her to go back to this original sound, but the original sound genuinely isn't that different to today's sound anyway. To start with, it wasn't really country music, it was just southern pop music with organic instrumentation. She hasn't really got the voice of some of these other artists on this list or what have been mentioned here. She's got a much weaker voice than them, and as a lyricist, she is pretty awful, if not just terrible flat out. She has managed to regurgitate the same themes for over 5 to 10 years now, but it's okay because she released one of the best country albums of all time, except she didn't. It's just a catchy pop album with some raw instrumentation, and if it is the best country music has ever had to offer, then country music has been underperforming for a long time. That about does it for this episode. If you enjoyed this, then please leave a like, comment what you think in the comment section down below. Remember that this is all my opinion. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. Subscribe to see more, and I'll see you around next time. Bye-bye.